anyone that is blocking the reconciliation bill at this point is voting against the president's agenda, against the Democratic agenda.
Progressive Democrats flexed their power with a big win ahead of the fight for the $3.5 trillion budget bill. Then they flooded cable news with their message. So I have those clips coming up in a minute here. First, to quickly summarize the fight, if you don't know already, half of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, so about 48 progressives, House members, will only vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill if the $3.5 trillion Build Back Better budget bill passes first. So the bipartisan infrastructure bill is in many ways largely a giveaway to corporations, though it does have some good provisions in there, like replacing lead pipes. But the real benefits are in the $3.5 trillion budget bill that includes Medicare expansion, dental and vision, paid family leave, universal pre-K, free community college, extended child tax credits, child care programs, and a climate change investment. So among other provisions in that bill. So that is where the actual benefits are for Americans. The infrastructure bill, largely a corporate giveaway, which is why you had 19 Republicans sign on to support that one. But before any of this, before the fight for or between these two bills, you have here progressives flexing their power. I'm not sure if this is related to this in any way, but I feel like it sort of is, showing you they are out there giving an example of how they can use their power and that they're willing to use it ahead of the fight for the $3.5 trillion. So this is what they did. Progressive Democrats succeed in removing $1 billion Iron Dome funding from bill. So progressive Democrats, in particular AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ayan Presley, and Jayapal, they were successful in forcing Democratic leadership to take out money that was going to go to Israel in the debt ceiling bill. So this is a whole separate bill, but they were successful in removing defense funding for Israel, which is incredible. So obviously this is in reaction to how Israel has the ongoing treatment of Palestinians there, the apartheid state that is Israel and the occupied territories. So you have here a situation where progressives are standing up for their values and succeeding, showing that they are, in fact, I think, willing to use their power when it comes to rejecting the bipartisan infrastructure bill unless the budget bill passes first, as they have been saying for months now. Now, before I get to several of these clips of them on cable news, and there's several Congress people on cable news discussing this fight, just to quickly go over some of the some items here. So you have 17 Nobel Prize winning economists backing Biden's $3.5 trillion Build Back Better plan, and actually saying here they refuted arguments made by Republicans and moderate Democrats that the massive human infrastructure bill, which will provide funding to expand education, healthcare, childcare, and climate efforts, is far too expensive. So you have here 17 recipients of the Nobel Prize in Economics supporting the $3.5 trillion Build Back Better package in rejection to, Manchin and Sinema, who are against it. Now, obviously, the influence of corporate money on, in particular, those two senators, but even, politics, of course, as a whole, but on those two senators, when it comes to this bill, is the reason they are right now continue to be against it. But it just, how many more holes do we have to blow in the arguments from Manchin and Sinema about how it's too much money when you have Nobel Prize winning economists here, 17 of them backing President Biden's infrastructure or his Build Back Better budget bill. Now, a little more. So you have Sunrise Movement targeting Kristen Sinema for obstructing the Build Back Better Act. Obviously here, they say, who do you work for? We know who she works for. She doesn't care about actual individuals. But it's good to see the fight, not even just, of course, within Congress, but also outside of Congress with movements like this, with activists like this, forcing or showcasing these sorts of actions. Tweeting out here, "You have failed us, Kristen Sinema. Face the crisis or get out of the way. We need clean air, water, public transportation, education, and millions of good-paying jobs now." And of course, this is in their support of $3.5 trillion and calling out Kristen Sinema being against it. Now, one last thing here before I go on to the clips. We are trying to save it, progressives say, as right-wing Dems sabotage Biden's agenda. So this is a common theme you're seeing throughout the commentary, throughout the message being put out there by progressive Democrats, that this is not just the agenda of progressives, but it's the agenda, first of all, of the American people, when you look at polling, the vast majority of Americans, whether they're conservative or left-leaning, support this agenda. But also, it's Joe Biden's agenda. So you have Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin, Democrats obstructing the Democratic Joe Biden agenda. And that is the correct way to frame this, especially when it comes to the press and how they put these messages out. So by framing it this way, which is the correct way to frame it, but usually you have progressives laying down, barely fighting. But by framing it this way, they are showcasing this isn't simply a fight of progressives versus moderates, so-called moderates, or progressives versus conservatives, but in fact, it is a fight of the entire Democratic Party, including Joe Biden, versus Manchin and Sinema, two fake Democrats. Now, let me get to these cable news appearances. So last night, you had on, there's everybody. So there's Jayapal, there was Katie Porter, there was Cori Bush. I believe there were even maybe a couple others, but here are some clips from those appearances last night of them fighting for this $3.5 trillion budget bill.
I will not support and vote for a bipartisan infrastructure bill that comes before reconciliation, because we know that reconciliation won't happen.
This is the Democrats' agenda, and we are willing to vote for both bills. Anyone that is blocking the reconciliation bill at this point is voting against the president's agenda, against the Democratic agenda.
You converted a Republican seat to a Democratic seat. You obviously know how to talk to Republican voters, and you know how to deal with that dynamic in your district, which not all Democrats do.
We want to make sure that both bills are moving together, and we're going to hold to that commitment. And so, yes, half our members, more than half our members, will not move the bipartisan bill without the reconciliation bill being passed.
Well, I think what the question to put to these conservative Democrats, and I've had some of these conversations, including tonight, is what do you want to cut? Tell me, do your constituents not have trouble paying for childcare? Are your constituents not worried about climate change? Are your constituents not in need of roads and bridges? Do your constituents not struggle to pay for the price of prescription drugs?
The progressives are bluffing about tanking the bipartisan infrastructure bill if that vote comes first. What do you have to say to them?
Try us.
That last clip is my favorite. Try us. Try us. So, we're going to see. And I think based on all their actions, why would they cave now? They've been holding to this for months now. If Manchin and Sinema don't want to support the budget bill, then they're going to tank the infrastructure bill as well. That's what's going to happen. And you have here, so I put that Katie Porter clip in there, that first one where Lawrence O'Donnell of MSNBC mentions how Katie Porter flipped a red district blue. It's important to bring this up because, oftentimes the arguments that are coming from these conservative Democrats is that, all these Democrats, these progressives, they're all in these safe districts. No, you have Katie Porter here who flipped a district blue, fighting for this $3.5 trillion because she understands what voters actually want, and she isn't bought off by large corporations the way that some other Democrats are. So she is willing to stick out this fight, and it really blows another hole in the bullshit arguments coming from conservative Democrats like Manchin and Sinema. One last thing here. This is what's going to happen today, so we're going to see if anything comes out of these meetings, but CNBC here with the headline, Biden will meet with more than a dozen key Democrats as infrastructure and budget bills hang in the balance. So he's going to meet first with the conservative Democrats like Manchin and Sinema and a couple others, and then he's going to meet with the progressives. So I don't know, in terms of the order of those meetings, if that means anything, but I guess it does mean that at the very least progressives have the last word, but it sounds like Biden's going to bring whatever arguments or red lines that these conservatives have. He's going to bring those arguments to the progressives and see how they feel about that. But I mean, it's been public for a while now. It's $3.5 trillion or nothing. So something's going to break. And if nothing breaks, then nothing gets passed. Ultimately, that's what's going to happen. And September 27th is supposedly supposed to be the deadline for the infrastructure bill to go to the floor. But the House isn't going to support that unless they've already voted, unless the Senate has already passed the budget bill, which seems unlikely. So a lot has to happen between now and then to see the future of these two bills. But at the very least, it's clear that progressives are holding the line on the $3.5 trillion budget bill.